Welcome to this Walk Talk podcast.
I'm Matt Smith.
And I am Bruce Thompson.
And together we're taking you on adventures in cybersecurity. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Hi Matt. How
Bruce,
are you?
yeah, I'm all right. I'm good. Yeah.
Good.
You okay?
Yeah, mustn't grumble. You know, another day in cyber.
Yeah.
Which, I was just reflecting on the other day that, cyber hadn't been invented when I was at school. Nor the internet, but that's another story.
No, that's a good point. Yeah.
And here we are chatting about how to keep it safe. I mean, what happened?
Yeah, and I suppose, many people who work in cyber didn't ever intend to start off doing that in the first place, did they? Although I suppose it's becoming more mainstream now.
Yeah, I think it is.
And what with all the degrees and things you can do in cyber, it's sort of being brought more into the mainstream, isn't it?
Actually, a quick shout out on degrees in cyber. I'm going to do a quick shout out for Dr. Mark Brett.
Doctor.
I
still can't get used to calling him Dr. Mark Brett.
Yeah, I've been playing around with Dr. Mark B or Dr. Marky.
He's done well, hasn't he?
Yeah.
He's taken him a long time to do that, and his thesis, which specifically covers local government and cyber, it's a valuable thing. So
absolutely, yeah.
I encourage people to read that if they can get hold of it.
And it is based around the broader public sector community and how to defend that and its supply chains. And I think we'll be talking a little bit about supply chain and beyond that, the sort of some ransomware stuff in this particular episode. But just reflecting on that, we used to hide behind our firewalls, and then we became more aware of the amount of vulnerabilities on our networks, and so we became perhaps more cyber introspective from a techie point of view. And certainly for me, I think I mentioned in the last podcast that, me discovering the fact that there was ransomware organizations in the supply chain that possibly hadn't communicated the fact that they'd been hit with ransomware because they didn't know. And yet there was NHS and council data available on the dark web that were part of someone's supply chain. I think that for me was one of the kind of initial things that in my mind took me beyond the other direction from the firewall and out into the supply chain. So having gone firewall inwards vulnerability, we're now out looking at supply chain, which I think leads us a little bit down the route to all the activity looking at supply chain, and indeed a project that you're working on, Matt.
Yeah.
Take us over that.
Yeah. So I think you're right. The whole ransomware thing. I guess when we kicked off Knapweed and kind of trying to keep an idea of what hacker gangs were doing from a dark web perspective, I guess originally we sort of thought about, we were thinking about councils, weren't we?
We were, yeah.
And I think in the end we were seeing not so much councils being hit, but it was more their supply chain.
Increasingly, yeah.
And therefore any council data that supply chain was holding would end up on the dark web. So it was almost like an indirect effect. And it's just kind of brought the whole supply chain thing to the fore. Many of our viewers will be aware of the CTAG work around email security. You hold very good free virtual workshops on email security, where you take a deep dive into their domains and see how you can help them out. But one of the things that I do is produce a monthly report, a RAG rated report on all of the UK council domains, just to see where we are, how people are doing, how we can help people, how they compare. But one of the things that we introduced a few years ago into that report was a separate sheet on the spreadsheet looking at suppliers and how well they have their domains set up in terms of security.
Or actually, when we started,
or how
how
well
much of a
not.
risk they were.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? And anyway, it struck me at the sort of beginning of the year, I guess, that, well, wouldn't it be nice if we could supplement that data with some kind of trust rating against the suppliers in terms of, well, how widely are those suppliers used across councils in the UK? What would be the impact on the business if something happened to them in terms of a cyber attack? Do they hold any PII data? So I thought, well, somehow if we could get hold of this data, we could build up a new column in the spreadsheet, if you like. And that way we could cross-reference any suppliers that need to do a bit of extra work on their domain security. If that cross-references and ties up, correlates with any dodgy trust rating scores that they might have.
Yeah, I mean,
it could tell us a few things.
It could. I think there is probably some kind of correlation somewhere, which if some organisation doesn't really care about their email and the reputation of their email and thus the reputation of their organisation, that might offer a little bit of an insight about how much they care about other things. I think is the direction of travel here, isn't it?
It's a good indicator, I think.
Yeah.
So, I've been beavering away in the background, trying to work out how I can get this data. We have a list of suppliers. I think it's over 600 on that spreadsheet. So it's a lot of suppliers to potentially get data about. So, I mean, I can't just send out a questionnaire to councils with a list of 600 suppliers on, saying, well, do you use them? Do they hold PII? How critical are they to your business? It would be a nightmare filling in a questionnaire like that.
It sounds like an awful lot of work.
So what I've had to do is try and split it all down into chunks, manageable chunks. It's taken me an inordinate amount of time to do it because I've had to go through. You have to bear in mind that the list of suppliers that we've got is only by domain name.
Right.
So I've had to go through every single one, check out each website to find out exactly what they do so that I can categorize them. And that way I can split them all into. It's taken me ages to do it. I've done it now. It's done. I've created a scripted form so that it ensures I only get one response per council. We've lost some light. It's back again.
Tech.
Yeah. And even now, I'm still not sure that the way that I'm thinking of doing it is the best way.
Okay.
Having said that, I've presented the idea to a few warps now. They all think it's a good idea. It's just getting this data. Once I've got the data, we can create a weighted score based on that data for every single supplier in that list. And I'm hoping that it'll be a valuable thing. There's lots of good pockets of supply chain work going on in the wider public sector. There's lots of good stuff with Risk Ledger. Shout out to Risk Ledger. I think it's a great platform. Lottie in London are doing the security scorecard project. There's loads of stuff going on. And of course, many councils have developed their own questionnaires for suppliers and build it into their procurement. But of course, when they've got existing, that only really comes into effect once renewals come around. So if they've got existing suppliers who have not gone through that process, they're a bit of an unknown quantity. So it's a tricky thing, really is. But I'm hoping it will be valuable if I can get it to work.
Well, I think there are similarities there also around, I think we talked about the Tarragon project on the last podcast.
Yeah.
I think some of the value of this is in this data coming from within our own sort of community. And I know, you mentioned Risk Ledger and people like that who, yes, they're picking up on some of that data, but I think, there's going to be suppliers that potentially we've got on our list of 600 that might not be in that particular database, for example.
Yeah.
And maybe that 600 gets bigger. So if I am a council and I look at this list and I say, oh, you don't appear to have some organization on there or some company we're working with, do I just contact you and get them on there?
Yeah,
or?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the more the merrier. There's no. I mean, it's not an exhaustive list. You know,
Sure.
And I think I try and encourage councils to think outside the box. You know, if they supply a stationery, you know, if you're interacting with them in some way, they could suffer a BEC, and you know the chances of them being used to get into a council, it's real. It's real.
There's one of the chairs of one of the warps, I think, frequently, well, perhaps not infrequently, but occasionally talks about, all you need is the manufacturer of toilet paper to be hit with a ransomware attack and not get their deliveries out.
That's it. Yeah,
and you would have all kinds of chaos.
Yeah. And of course, we know from what's been going on in the press lately that social engineering is a big thing, and that affects everybody, any supplier. So think outside the box. If you want me to add a particular supplier to the list, just get in contact with me. You know how. But it's I just did not expect it to take so long to sort of sanitize that list of suppliers. I even outsourced some of it. So shout out to Grace. You know who you are. Thank you. She did a great job. But it's
sounds
big.
a little bit like something I occasionally say. Oh, that'll only take about a dozen lines of code, and I'll have it done by tea time. And suddenly you're thousands of lines of code deep.
Yeah, plenty of coffee required.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll keep you posted on how it's going.
Yeah, it's an exciting project, and I think what excites me a little bit on it when you first sort of said, Bruce, I've got an idea, and I thought, this is super good. Is the community involvement in surfacing that data and sharing that information, which is great. B, it sort of builds on to what the Z thing's doing, and it's sort of parallel to some of the Tarragon stuff, and I sometimes got this sort of perspective that, you get the central government organisations coming up with, we're going to do this for the UK public sector, or we're going to do this for councils. And actually, we're quite good at getting organised down here and doing things for ourselves. And increasingly, I think, able to sort of share some of these things. Now we've got the mechanisms to share them. Yeah. So, it's interesting the way that the Warp Talk Slack group sort of, went from strength to strength. And I think we're, how many people are in that these days? It's
over 800.
Over 800.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So, a lot of people contribute, but a lot of people actually, take goodness out of that. And, this was organised, down here in the trenches, shall we say. And it sounds like this particular project you're working on is again taking some of that information from people in the trenches, at the coalface, all those terms. Trenches and coalface in the same paragraph. It's not particularly clever, is it?
Yeah.
But same metaphors. But it's exactly that. We're very capable of getting organised. And I think that's that for me is a key component here.
Yeah,
really.
and hopefully people will see the value in it, and we'll fill those forms in. I've had a lot of worries about this project, and one of them is that you're going to need no one individual in a council is going to be able to fill this form because not one person knows all of the suppliers that they use. So I think it's going to be I don't know whether it's going to be involving procurement or to get the form filled in, but I think it's going to be tricky. But
so, are you going to publish a subset of this data as it becomes ready, or are you going to wait until it's about 80% done, or have you got a perspective on that?
I think the issue with that is that I could start publishing. I could start supplementing the RAG report with the data as soon as it starts coming in. The issue is around how much a supplier is used, how widely a supplier is used.
Yeah.
And of course, the more the more councils that submit the data, the more accurate that particular piece of data becomes. So it won't be until all of the councils have submitted their data that I'll get a 100% accurate result. That's not to say that any data is not useful. But I think, that's a tricky one, actually.
Yeah, I thought it might be.
Yes, thanks for that. Yeah, it's not. I would rather give it some time. I wouldn't want to publish it straight away. But I suppose, I may be pleasantly surprised and may get inundated.
Yeah,
which would be good.
I was just thinking of our, of our audience, Matt, thinking, "Oh, this sounds really good. When am I going to see it?"
Yes. No, that's a good point. No, I mean, I'll just have to see how quickly the data comes in. But I wouldn't want to do it too soon because I'd like it to be reasonably accurate before I do the first publication.
Yeah, I mean, and again, as a similarity there with with the Tarragon project around, it's got to be accurate, it's got to be recent, it's got to be up to date, it's got to be all those things.
Yeah.
Or you end up with some kind of CrowdStrike moment or something. Well, and you wouldn't wish to malign any supplier either.
No.
I think it's one thing to point out that they might be poor at something. It's something else to misrepresent them altogether.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, this is the other thing about supply chain, isn't it? I think some people are a little bit quick to sort of point the finger, but it's a collaborative thing, isn't it? If you find an issue with a supplier, you work with them to sort it out. You don't have a go at them. So it is about collaborating with your supply chain because we're all in it together.
Yeah, and there are some good examples of that. I'm just thinking of, again, you'll know who you are. So if I said Alan up in the Northwest, I think he takes some of the Z data and quite frequently talks to suppliers into his organisation to say, hey, look, you're doing a good job, but can you have a look at this?
Yeah.
And this has been like that for X period of time. And I think he's got quite a long history of taking his suppliers to task just using the Z data.
Yeah, because he's been using that for a while now.
Yeah, and doing lots of other good things with it. But we might have to come on to that in another podcast.
So do you think that, going back to the ransomware aspect of it, I mean, have you seen ransomware developing over the last year, 2 years, 18 months, whatever? Has it changed much in the way that gangs attack people? I mean, what's happened?
I think there are several things. I think there are accidents and intentions, or another way of putting it, I think there's some tourists and some definite casualties there. So if we go back a couple of years, we saw UK schools being attacked.
Lots.
Because the attacker couldn't differentiate between UK and American schools. They were hitting American schools because they would pay, and because the UK schools just happened to use English. I mean, come on, we invented it. They got hit.
Yeah.
And that was just a mistake. They were casualties, in a ransomware group's focus around the US education sector. So we've seen that. We have seen ransomware attacks because people in the ransomware groups have English as a second or tertiary language. And would you believe, think.uk is Ukraine. So we've had organisations in the UK being hit because they thought they were in the Ukraine. And this particular group was, either state-sponsored and or, seeking to hit the Ukraine to support Russia. So we've seen that as well. And then we have seen, of late, specific, social engineering-based attacks on, the UK supply chain, some of the Marks and Spencer stuff and the Co-op stuff, unfortunately. But I think there's something else going on altogether. And I think whilst there have been, almost the household names of the ransomware industry. So, Lockbit 3, you have policies and procedures and, sign up forms for affiliates and all those kind of things. And they've been hit a couple of times and, they were able to bounce back because their backups worked. I mean, This is all good stuff from their point of view. So that's interesting. But one of the things I've noticed of late is a move away from what I would call the kind of trophy attack. Now, or big game hunting, as a researcher I know refers to it. So, taking out Marks and Spencer's is potentially a trophy or big game. Taking out a small pub in Totnes isn't. So why attack the small pub in Totnes? Well, arguably, a large target is more able to pay. Typically, the way that insurance industries in different countries respond mean that some targets are more likely to pay. But smaller businesses, let's just zoom in on that for a second. The attraction for ransomware operators is this. Using your initial access brokers, we try and block them in Terragon Active. So use Terragon Active, you can block these people. But if they find an access, it's going to be more likely on a small business. A poorly configured, cheap as chips firewall on your broadband that's set up for your remote IT company to get in to fix your tills in your business. And they use the very simple password combination and no secondary factor. So they can come through your cheapest chips firewall to fix your tills or whatever that is, or your PCs or something. So in comes a internet or initial access broker. They scan this, they find this combination. Rather than sell this data on because they have a quick look, realize it's a small business, they just buy in a ransomware as a service and go for it. Set a small payment fee. Hello, we're going to take your tills offline because we've encrypted them. Small business is going to panic. Do that just before lunch in a pub. You suddenly go cash only. But when you close for the afternoon, you're going to try and fix this because you're going to open for the evening. You're going to pay typically a small ransom of £3,000 to £5,000 because it solves the problem. Are you going to tell the ICO? No. Are you going to tell Action Fraud? No. That's all admin. You haven't got time for that. You just want to get the pub open in the evening. And so, if you are the ransomware operator, for a day's work, you're £3,000 to £5,000 UK in Bitcoin up. So, that 2 or 3 times a week is going to keep you in cheesecake or something. I don't know. I don't know the price of cheesecake. But the point I'm making is that the attacks on supply chain, and I'm not saying a pub is part of anyone's supply chain, likely to be listening to this podcast, but nonetheless, it's a good example where what if that wasn't a pub? What if it was a small supplier or a subcontractor to your supply chain, where suddenly you have shared data down your supply chain to a medium-sized organization who's outsourced some of that and potentially PII and potentially safeguarding data to another organization. I'll give you another example. What if you are a supplier into a public sector organization in the broadest sense, so including housing associations, and that data relates to a human being that is passed to a medium-sized company involved in the care industry who might outsource a couple of cases to a guardian ad litem or someone similar. So this is someone working for home on a fairly small basis, maybe billing a couple of £1,000 a month tops, as some salary. And yet they are hit with a ransomware attack. Now, I suspect that individual might well report it to the ICO because they are that kind of person. But what if they decide not to? What if they don't even realize? Or what if they consider it's cheaper to pay and rather than tarnish their reputation and not get any more work? And so we see the ransomware thing evolving to smaller and smaller organizations. It becomes more opportunistic. It becomes like mobile phone theft. If you see someone with a mobile phone out, unfortunately, it can be grabbed by someone on a bike or a scooter. It's opportunistic. It's like a burglar who sees your windows open because you forgot to close them on a hot evening and you've popped out to the local pub in Totnes that's recently been ransomwared. They're grateful for your money. And burglar lets themselves in. It becomes more opportunistic. And I think this is something we also need to think about. It's that kind of subcontractor to the supply chain. I know I'm just making things worse here for everybody. Oh, we hadn't thought of that. But I think that's where it's going to potentially hit. I think there'll be more and more smaller targets, more and more smaller SMEs. And I think, if if more of those organizations did things like Cyber Essentials and, the push down on Cyber Essentials out to those smaller organizations happened, I think that would help, because it makes the questions they ask their suppliers in turn more difficult. So back to a small pub in Totnes that was hit with ransomware, would that access exist if they had done Cyber Essentials? They would have thought about it. They might have fixed it. The vulnerability that might have existed on that small cheap as chips firewall may have been updated because of they're not permitted to have vulnerable things. That becomes addressed, and I think this is something we've got to keep pushing away at, got to keep chipping away at, because the ransomware gangs have evolved, what they're doing in the supply chain. And I think the targets are getting smaller and smaller, which probably puts more pressure back on your project, Matt.
So, yeah, we all know that supply chain is a many-layered thing. Potentially infinite. You don't know how far down it goes. Do you think we're going to see more gangs, attackers, doing more research? They have an end goal in their sights, a big company, and they're going to do their research and work out down the supply chain, however many layers they want to go, and start off down there so that they can work back up through to the... Absolutely. Do you think that's going to happen more and more?
I think initially we had this view that ransomware gangs took the data and put it on the dark web. I seem to recall, even going back as far as the ISFL conference in 2024, and I spoke there about the idea of ransomware gangs looking at this data to see what value it was to them, whether or not the ransom was paid, and or selling this data on to other organizations. And again, we know the way that the Chinese ransomware gangs or groups operate is that they exchange data. They build mass data lakes around targets they can attack. And, there's more than a few theories out there around some of the high street attacks we've seen in the UK about potentially these being linked to a single supplier. And I don't know if that's the case or not. But there's rumors and theories all over the place. But the answer to that is yes. These ransomware gangs, these groups are, very capable of looking at the data. It's kind of almost the first thing you would do. What's in the data set? Are there, is there anything in here we can use? Is there bank details? Is there passwords? Who are their suppliers? Do we have these suppliers mentioned in other data sets? These lists of passwords that we happen to have got, are these passwords to supplier sites? Have we got procedures around how is a supplier that we've hit with ransomware works with other organizations? Is this in the policy and procedure set that we've stolen? Is this in the submission they make every year to get a specific criteria, like their ISO 27001, for example, or their Cyber Essentials, or, their CAF? Are there detailed policies and procedures here that we can use and exploit to carry out ransomware attacks, particularly pushing down onto organizations that are less likely to have this level of accreditation in place? The weaker links in the chain. That to me, if I was running a ransomware group, would be, where I would be doing my research on the data that I've stolen. What can I exploit here? Yes, hopefully I want to get some money in for my hard work in stealing your data, but actually, what else can I do with the data? How many times can I sell it? Whose data can I link it with? Do I get some information back out of that if we work together? That whole thing is a whole industry that I think is is very much alive and happening out there.
And do you, conversely, do you think that the whole days of encrypting your data and nothing else is over?
I think that data has sailed.
Yeah. It's all about the data now, isn't it?
I think it has been for a while.
Yeah.
And yes, I think encryption is still a technique used by a number of organizations, that they might part encrypt or just encrypt file names. There's a whole bunch of things they can do there. But getting the data is the prize.
Yeah.
And I think increasingly using that data is almost a bigger prize. Yes, there's the extortion component of, we'll put your data on the dark web, and there's the whole safeguarding thing and all of that we need to sort of do. But actually the value to the attacker here is making use of that data, and the second and sort of subsequent sales they get, as well as the shared intel.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is going to dictate the way the sort of ransomware game evolves.
And I guess this is why it's so important that you know exactly what data you've got and what the impact would be if somebody else had it.
Yeah, and it's understanding what's been stolen, which I'm sure the ICO are doing a good job on that, and that was frequently a question that came into Napweed, is what data is there? And getting those file lists out was always something that was particularly well received by organizations. Can you get a list of the files? And at least that gives you a start point for, oh lordy,
absolutely.
This is the scope and scale of the problem.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is very much the where we end up with a small pub in mid Devon being hit.
Yeah.
It is know that size of target is a viable target.
Yeah.
And it's and we'll still get the big game targets. That will still happen. And there will be, unfortunately, other UK councils and NHS orgs and, dare I say, housing providers and old people's homes, some of the larger groups, they will be some of those trophies. But it is those supply chain hits that I think we've got to increasingly keep an eye on, and their subcontractors. And we don't talk about that. We say manage the supply chain, but I think we've got to start thinking around the supply chain to the supply chain to the supply chain. And it is that, no pun, but it is that Russian doll thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's a minefield, isn't it? It really is. Well, look, that's been a real nice little, almost a shallow exploration of the whole supply chain thing, because we could go on for hours probably. But
I think we're giving people enough work.
I think so. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one.
Absolutely.